Welcome in to the Just Basketball Show. I am Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. Thanks again to our whole team on the back end. And want to tell you about one of our partners, Thrive Fantasy. They are a player prop DFS platform where you can pick more or less than on your favorite players across multiple sports, including the NBA and the NFL. You can sign up today with our code JustBasketball. It is all one word. And Thrive will match your first deposit up to $250. Please follow us on your favorite podcast app platform of choice, 5 stars only. Hit subscribe on the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel. Brennan, the trade deadline has come and gone. I'm getting excited about All-Star for some reason. I'm not totally sure why, but trade deadline is here. It is gone. We're going to go through the 5 teams that define the trade deadline, but I want to ask you this before we get into team number 1. Was this a good trade deadline? Was this exciting? Like, where did we come out here considering DeJounte Murray wasn't traded? You know, a lot of the moves felt a little bit smaller. There was no shock star trade at the last minute.
The Bulls were buyers.
The Bulls the Bulls didn't trade Andre Drummond, didn't trade Alex Caruso, didn't trade DeMar DeRozan. Obviously, Zach LaVine's hurt. What did you make of this deadline overall in terms of the action we actually got?
Well, look, it was spread out. If you include the Harden, Siakam, and Anunoby deals, this was a great trade season for the league, but it just happened first in November and then in the month leading up to the deadline more so than all at once. So we got a lot of movement, and I think most every team at the top of the league looks a little different than they did on October 1st or whatever. But as far as today goes, yeah, I think this is what we were expecting. I think it was a lot of smaller moves, and I think it set up what should be a fun offseason. But no, I mean, I would be a sicko if I was sitting here and I was like, no, this was great. This was everything I wanted and more. Last year we got Kevin Durant traded, and the Lakers remade their whole roster and everything else. This year was much quieter than that, but I think there's still a lot that could affect the playoff picture, maybe the title picture we can get into today.
Yeah, I'm very much the same. I think if you look at the whole scope, that this is probably setting a tone for the future. Maybe we're not going to get deadline deals. You're going to get star trades that bleed into the beginning of the season and teams making moves earlier. And I think it's interesting, Brennan, the team I think we should start with is the New York Knicks, a team that obviously got out ahead of the trade market by going and get OG and Anunoby several weeks ago at this point. OG obviously dealing with an injury right now, but they went and got Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks from the Detroit Pistons. They gave up 2 second-round picks, Evan Fournier, Malachi Flynn. Malachi Flynn on the move once again after being traded in the OG trade to New York, and now he's off to Detroit. And then Quentin Grimes, I think a favorite here of the Just Basketball Show, going through Detroit as well. I actually want to, at the end, kind of just like hit on a couple, the fact that I sort of like what some of the pieces now the Pistons have. I just like that they got Grimes. That's cool for them. I like that as a building block for them, frankly. But, Brennan, the Knicks part of this to me, the more I've sat with it, the more that I like it. I don't think Burks, I'm super in love with them going and bringing him back into the system. I don't totally think he's going to be super additive to them come playoff time. But I think Bogdanovic could be. I think particularly in the structure they have with OG, with all the big wings, you don't have to worry about him being the defensive potential liability I think he is more of at this point in his career now that he's a little bit older. He can kind of come in and just be shot-making, tough on closeout shooters, Bojan, and play more limited minutes. That's a pretty good role for what he is at this stage in this age. This team clearly has an identity. They're big everywhere. Jalen Brunson is going to continue to have to be the one pulling out the strings in a real way. Burks is going to provide a certain more Emmanuel Quickley-esque kind of scoring punch if he's going to provide anything for this group. But I feel like here they doubled down on their strengths. The Knicks didn't try to change what is going on here. The Knicks use the deadline to reinforce what already works.
I love them going all in. I just think it would have been a bummer if we heard kind of what we heard from the Lakers camp, right? Which is like,
yes,
well, they're punting till July. They have an opportunity. I mean, how surprised would you be if I said we fast forwarded to June 1st and I told you, or whatever it is, and I said, the Knicks are representing the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals. Like, that wouldn't shock you, would it?
It would borderline shock me just because I think Boston should just be the team that gets there. But the Knicks are making the case as the second option behind them. I mean, I think you'd feel stronger. I think you could make an argument that right now, Brendan, there's a couple teams ahead of the Bucks right now. And the Bucks have the star power at the highest level, obviously, but their track record this year has been a little wonky. The Knicks are as solid as they come. They're playing great basketball for the most part as of late. Cavs, same thing, and both those teams have a lot to prove, and I think Boston is still very much ahead of the pack here, but I wouldn't be as shocked as I would have been a month ago, is kind of how I would answer that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my point is I like that they looked at that opportunity and didn't say, we made our move. We have OG. We have him now and for the future. Let's see what that shift can do for us, along with, the DiVincenzo signing, which has been huge, and they have Precious and whatever. Let's try again. We made it, game 6 of the second round last year. Maybe we go further this year. But instead they were like, no, July is July. Right now we have an opportunity to improve and do whatever to get 10% closer to our goal of winning a championship, which I think they have to be thinking of as their goal now. And I just like that. But at the same time, to me, these moves were more regular season moves. I look at the rotation that the Knicks now have, and it's, guys that are locks to play in the postseason for them. Brunson, Anunoby, Randall, Mitchell Robinson if he's healthy. I would probably put Josh Hart and Josh Hart on that list and DiVincenzo on that list, if not for anything other than their defense, perimeter-wise. So we're already like most of the way to what their final set of guys will be for a big postseason game. Like, how many minutes does Bogdanovich play in a game 7 in the second round? Is it more than 0? Yeah,
I think so. I
okay.
think there's.
What role do you think he plays for them?
I just think there's going to be a need for him as the shooter, as kind of a tough guy. I just think it's a lever you can pull if the series dictates it. Like, is it a lock, Brendan, that he plays a heavy amount of minutes? No, but I think if they get in certain series and series flow a certain way, this gives them optionality at the very least. Like,
flows what kind of way? Flow if you look at matchups, if you look at their roster before this, like, that's what I'm saying is if they had gotten like a guy who was exactly like Quickly, that would have made perfect sense to me. But I guess I'm almost looking at the point you made before of that they're doubling down on some of their pre-existing strengths, and that to me makes it less of a lock that these moves are needle movers.
I'm not even 100% like sure how much of a needle mover it is, but I think if you get this guy who is just a proven shot maker who you can fit pretty cleanly with Brunson, and I think the way I look at it is there's going to be times in the playoffs, Brennan, no matter who they play, that they're going to see 2 on the ball against Brunson in the playoffs. The obvious counter to that is to put as much shooting around Brunson as you possibly can. There's going to be moments in the series. Julius Randle's had a great year. Okay, I don't want to dispute that, but there's going to be points where I think Bogdanovich is going to make more sense as a 4 to just relieve pressure off of Brunson in these playoff situations, and it's Brunson as kind of the only guy. Certainly, I think you would have liked a Quickly other guy to play with him, or maybe you could have just developed Grimes better. I think that's a reasonable argument to wonder if they just kind of wasted some of the Grimes stuff in his potential there. But I think you're going to see moments where it's like OG, Brunson, one of Harden, DiVincenzo, and Bogdanovich is there as the 4, and then you put Hartenstein, or if Robinson does come back, then hey, there's your 5. And I think you're just going to have a counter with him to keep playing the way you are. This to me feel the Burks one. I'm not as much sold on. Bogdanovich, I think you're going to be able to use him for counters you are going to need to have come the playoff time. Is it a 30-minute a game role like he has played most of his career? I don't think so. But is it 15? Is it 20? Is there a chance he plays 25 minutes in a game 7 because he's helping you space a certain way? I think there's a chance you see some kind of that because he's that kind of shot maker and shot taker, and at least you can trust him in that one way that I think is really valuable to help free up Jalen Brunson when they see different kinds of coverages come to playoffs. I think that's where the thinking is here.
Yeah, I like that. I think Randall also obviously being hurt and having a track record of little things always seeming to be hurting him physically makes it a good insurance policy just no matter what you're looking at. And I think, to me, the place I look is Josh Hart. I'm still not convinced that if you really are treating every playoff game as must win, and I think there is a different mentality that they will have this year versus last year, where it's like getting your feet wet versus really going for it. And if that's the case, and you have other options now, I do think Hart is somebody that you can maybe turn the volume down on at times because he can just be such a liability on offense. He serves a very specific role. I think you have to play him, but you don't have to rely on him maybe and get into these games where, to your point, the ball's moving and suddenly you look at the box score and the guy's taken 8 threes and made 1 or 2 of them just because the defense is forcing you into that situation. So, yeah, I like it. And I think in the regular season, again, I do think Burks, I see it really well. But yeah, I don't know. I who handles the ball for them when Brunson's off the court in the playoffs?
He might. It just feels like Tibbs is going to be like, "Hey, can you give me 40?" Like I say this somewhat in jest, but this feels like a very Tibbsy thing where it's like, I got my one guy that I trust. Can I play him as many minutes as possible and ride him into the ground? But I think, Brendan, that's a real concern. There's not a real guy to, like, you can't ever really replace Brunson even with you had a more traditional backup point guard, or even if you had quickly. Like, it's not going to be 1-to-1. Obviously, Brunson's playing at this super high level that makes him. You can't replace him unless you have another star.
No, but I texted you this as the stuff was going that, like, why couldn't they have done the Monte Morris deal?
Or go get Tyus Jones. I would probably.
Well, nobody got Tyus Jones, so it's kind of hard to hold them to a standard of a deal that didn't happen. But we know Monte Morris got moved. They could have matched that. It was 1 second-round pick and basically some salary. That it just feels like it's an imperfect fit, but they must have a plan.
It's probably playing Jalen Brunson like a lot of minutes is what I.
Well, he can't literally play 48 though.
I know. It just feels like the plan is going to be like it. This feels very Tibbsy to me, Brendan. This just feels very much like Tibbs is going to do a certain thing. Like, for better, like I agree with you. He can't literally play 48 minutes. Alec Burks is probably going to be like your backup point guard in some scenarios.
Or maybe it's just sort of somebody to dribble, and then like DiVincenzo can do a little bit of that, and then maybe you really just ride Randall. I mean, so this season, in games that both Brunson and Randall have played, Brunson off, Randall on, 191 minutes. They are +2. So they've survived. Largely because their defense has been solid in those lineups. I would imagine there's a lot of like Hart and Hartenstein and whatever in those groups, but maybe Anunoby recently. But that's kind of what you're looking for. If you're getting a +2 net rating out of the Brunson off minutes in the playoffs, you're probably winning a lot of games. So maybe it's not a huge problem, but I do just think like there were solutions to that problem, even if you think of it as a small problem. And instead they were like, well, let's get Alec Burks because he's on the team we're already negotiating with and we've had him in the building before. It just feels a little funny, but I agree. The Bogdanovich one is much more important. Can we switch to the Grimes part of this?
Yeah. So what do you, I just want to say, I do like his fit in Detroit. If they're doing what they are doing and adding just another piece, and it's Cade, and it's their Thompson twin, and it's Jalen Duren, and it's I still think they're a ways away from having this figured out.
Wait a second.
But Brendan,
I believe you that you do know, but do you know which Thompson twin is on which team? Was that?
No, this here's the thing. This has been so many names I've looked at today that I'm generally like I'm double checking myself. It's Oscar Thompson. Amen Thompson is on the Rockets. This has been Brendan. There's been so many names I've read today. Like I forgot about that Ryan Arcidiacono was like in the league, much less that he was on the Celtics at one point. Like there's just a lot of things that I forgot today that
it's okay. I just am a big Thompson twin believer, so I need the respect on their names on this show. And you called him their Thompson twin as if he doesn't have a first name. So I just needed the clarity.
I like this bit of like if the Pistons were gonna do this, I like getting a guy like Grimes on their team. We don't exactly know what that Pistons team is doing, but they got a guy that I really like, and I think you really like, and I think whatever comes next for them, that's the kind of guy that A, he should be more empowered now, and B, I think can get better in a new situation. It's a little disappointing to me of how this ends with him in the Knicks because I think the ceiling for him was higher than it ever. I think there's more they could have gotten out of him that they just never did, or Tibbs never did.
Yeah,
depending on how you want to frame that, but I do like this as a get for the Pistons. If you're actually going to make moves in your Detroit, I like getting someone like Grimes and not just getting some picks and or at least they didn't get another center or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, look, I think Detroit to me, I didn't hate their overall approach, even dating back to the Bagley trade. You know, they were fairly opportunistic with a few things, like the House trade and this move where they didn't come in and pick an avenue too aggressively and say we're buyers or we're sellers. You know, they seem to be decently close on Levine. That would have been somewhat of a buy, but that didn't prevent them from saying we don't need Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic on our team. You know?
Yeah.
And I think also the deal that they got for Bagley, I think they had to give up at least 1 second in that to get off of him, but I think Muscala and Gallinari can play. Like Gallinari can kind of fill a lot of what Bogdanovic was doing for them, frankly, you know, as a veteran shooter who doesn't make like huge mistakes on offense. Like he's already been playing, just fill those minutes in. And so to come out of this with some extra assets and especially Grimes, I think is not terrible. But yeah, I mean, Grimes is exactly the type of guy I think you want next to Cade Cunningham. Personally, like, you know, just somebody with decent size who competes on defense and can make open shots. Like that's the rubric. That's the recipe for building around a star creator like Cade, which I'm still going to call Cade Cunningham that for the foreseeable future. We'll see if that title ends up being accurate or not. But if that's still the goal for them, which it is, build around him. I think Grimes is a great guy to get back for two vets that you had no need for. Like the two first round pick stuff for Bogdanovic and all that was always stupid. So if you had told me even last deadline, hey, they're going to get some seconds and Grimes, I'd be like, great, perfect. Get rid of Bogdanovic today. So it took a while. They got there, but I like the moves, and hopefully they can get a little more stable as far as what their long-term plan is. I wanted them to trade Isaiah Stewart personally, but that's all right.
Couldn't agree more with that part of it. Is it a failing on the Knicks at all, Brendan, to have to trade Grimes in this way? He wasn't part of a bigger star package. He wasn't part of he wasn't even part of the OG trade, which he didn't need to be, but he wasn't. Is this kind of return that is sort of a reinforce the team, nothing super splashy? Is that say something about how the Knicks did or did not? Phil Grimes, and I have seen the post where it is like all the Knicks like young guys that they developed. Yeah. They've all been excised now, and he was the last one.
It's still only Barrett as far as first round picks to re-sign for like the past 20 years, and then they got rid of Barrett too. You know, they trade Obi Toppin last summer. They trade Barrett and Quickly for OG. Now they trade Grimes here. I guess the way that I would put it is this. I think that they had already sunk his value to the point that thinking that he would be the centerpiece of some sort of star move is a little bit silly anyway. So, you know, whatever status he held when he was like the crown jewel of Donovan Mitchell talks, he's not that anymore. That was 2 years ago. So the fact that you're trading him now doesn't mean you're trading that guy. You're trading what he is now, which was a depleted asset because he didn't seem to jive with Tom Thibodeau. He had lost his place in the starting lineup and wasn't getting a ton of minutes, and him developing did not seem to be a priority of theirs. That said, like, it comes at you fast with this stuff in terms of team building in the NBA. It's not that far between September 22, we're talking about Donovan Mitchell, and we have a package that could easily outbid anybody, to all of our guys are making $10+ million. We have no more picks and we have no more young talent. I'm not saying they're there, but it happens very fast. So to me, the best thing you would say is that they've won or done a good job in all these trades. It's not like they've spoiled these assets on trades that look really stupid. So it obviously makes it easier to stomach that. And all of this, Chris, in my opinion, is a lot easier when you sign a guy who suddenly becomes a bona fide number one on a championship team, which is what I believe Jalen Brunson can be, for $26 million. You're paying him $26 million and he's going to get MVP votes. So you can do a lot of stuff that other teams can't afford to do because of that.
Last thing we'll say, at least we can say in the Knicks here, the most interesting race to me in the NBA now for the playoffs is who gets the 2 seed in the East. That's going to have a lot of value. That will be a potential home court in the second round. And there's 3 teams they're running for: Cleveland, Milwaukee, New York. How those teams sort themselves out, who comes out ahead, who actually gets that, and frankly, who also doesn't finish fourth. If I would take third over fourth just to be on the opposite side of Boston. That race behind Boston, ahead of Philly and Indiana and Miami and all those teams, the number one, I think, most interesting race down the stretch as far as an actual definitive seed goes. And there's a lot of other stuff in the West as well, but that to me is the one. It's going to be very, very valuable. And if the Knicks pull it off, they could owe it in part to this deadline. Let's move on to Oklahoma City. Let's flip conferences. Oklahoma City, Brendan, I want to give myself a slight pat on the back here, because the team that I said was the biggest mystery was the Oklahoma City Thunder. I did not have on my bingo card at all that they were going to go and get Gordon Hayward at this deadline. I thought maybe they go get a big, maybe they go get some kind of just other depth, maybe they do some shuffling around. But to get Gordon Hayward, I don't think really give up very much, frankly. Use the Davis Bertans salary. This is a move I really like for them, and it doesn't change their identity. Getting Gordon Hayward doesn't really make them have to adjust how they play in the way that a more traditional 5 would have vis-a-vis Chet. And I like this as a move for them as a rental at the very least, and maybe a veteran piece that they can have around for a little bit longer after this year if it works out down the stretch run.
Yeah, we talked about this with Brunson and the Knicks just now, that how much do you really need to value a backup for one of your best players? The level of energy being put behind telling the Thunder that they need a backup for Chet got very out of control to me. At first, I was on board when it sounded like we were just saying overall the team needs more size, which I agree with, because even their backup forwards are pretty small, guys like Aaron Wiggins or Kenrich Williams or Jalen Williams even. But then it became go get Nick Claxton and this type of stuff, Jared Allen.
Yeah.
And it's just their second best player plays center. Why would you do this? So I thought this type of trade made a lot more sense. And I think we also underestimate how specific Oklahoma City's style of play is.
Yeah.
That is not an easy team to just come in and integrate with. You either have to be able to handle the ball and drive, or be somebody who can move in space off of those drivers. And Hayward can be both, but especially the first thing. He's somebody who his whole career, his bread and butter is play in the pick and roll, play in space, get downhill. He can score at all 3 levels. He's shifty. He is very he's actually like a great version, maybe not as good of a passer, but stylistically and body-wise, like he kind of is what Mitsic was for them, and that guy was playing for them. So I think this makes a lot more sense than any of that would have. And so, plus they're so deep and young, they don't really. If he gets a pulled hamstring in game 1 of the playoffs and ends up not really playing a factor, they're fine. So I think it was a pretty low risk move for them that could really pay off.
The part of this I find most interesting is that this is such a ready-made, we don't trust Josh Giddey in a playoff series kind of move.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching Thunder Utah the other night, and this isn't the first time this has happened. But we saw the Utah Jazz in a close game, in a game they ultimately won, basically just dare Josh Giddey to do something with the ball in his hands late in the game. They left him open. They said, "You want to shoot it? Great. We're not really going to give you clean driving lanes. Some of the best skills you have, we're going to take away because we can just give you space and cramp up the rest of the floor. And what makes you interesting and special is off the board." You get to a position where now that if it's the first round or it's the second round or wherever it is, you now just have a guy that you can put in that spot on the floor. And are you losing some athleticism? Sure. Are you losing? Is there some different energy there? For sure. But you're gonna have a guy who's gonna take threes, who can drive, who's a little bit bigger and bulkier, who's a little more proven in that case. And that's something of a win now team for a team that doesn't have to be all in this year and didn't go all in at this deadline, Brendan. But that this is a win now kind of trade in a way for you to tell yourself we're not just gonna let Josh Giddey go out to play and have to figure it all out or fail, and that's the NLBL. You have a counter, you have an adjustment built in here when Giddey struggles in the playoffs, and to me is the most notable part of this trade.
Yeah, the thing with Giddey too is it's easy to focus because teams play off of him or they'll guard him with a center, and they really put under a microscope what his weaknesses are in that realm. But he also is not a good finisher.
No.
He's in the 19th percentile as a finisher this season among forwards. He is 42% from floater range, which is a career low. He had made those shots better in the past, but that's mediocre for forwards. And he's making a third of his threes, which could be worse. But to me, it's really that other ingredient. Whereas Hayward, it's I trust him to maybe get to the line a little bit more. He is shooting 70% at the rim this season, 73% last year, above 60% every year since his last season in Utah. So, yeah, for a team, too, that because they are so deep, and the same thing I was just saying about how they don't have to rely on him, that also means they don't even have to ask him to do much of anything in the regular season. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see much from Hayward in the regular season until maybe, a month or two from now when they start to ramp him up, and then he maybe is a guy that they pencil in for 10, 12 minutes in a postseason situation, maybe 20, whatever it looks like, but they don't have to. And I think that'll help him stay healthy on top of everything else. So, yeah, again, they gave up nothing. I mean, Trey Mann, people like to talk him up. I don't really get it. It's just a guard that can score. I'm not saying he's nothing, but that for them, it was a pretty obvious move. He wasn't playing. And the Bertans salary, we all knew they were going to trade anyway. So that coupled with they now can re-sign Hayward. I don't think he's getting a raise on his current salary, but they can sign him anywhere up to or beyond that because they have his bird rights and roll that asset forward in terms of what the Bertans salary had been for them. Maybe next deadline we're talking about that as the Hayward salary because now they have another big number to use in a future trade. So this was a no-brainer, I think, even though it felt very out of left field.
The rotation now, SGA, Jalen Williams, J-Dub, the really, really good Jalen Williams, Chet, Lou Dort, Giddey, Hayward, Kason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, Kenrich Williams, and Aaron Wiggins. And if Aaron Wiggins gets cut out, whatever that looks like, I mean, they just have.
Did you say Did you say Jay Will, the other Jalen Williams? I think he's their backup center, so he'll play. I think.
So he's 10, 11 guys. You have 10, 11 guys right there. If you have to figure out certain other things, or maybe there's a buyout thing they could do now and get like just another big in there and do it that way. If you want that, I think you could easily do that here. But this roster just like is deep and makes sense. Like, and they didn't try to your point about their play style, Brendan. They didn't try and like readjust their entire play style. They didn't bring in something that's going to cause an adjustment. Like, this is also, I think, good for Hayward at this stage in his career. Certainly, he didn't want to get a buyout. Financially, I very much get that. So this to me is like a good balance of he gets to play more competitive basketball and still make pretty good money. And he can play fewer minutes. And I think for considering his injury history and all of that, I think this is a win for him as much as it is, I think, a win for the Thunder. What about the Hornets side of this? Do you have any thoughts about what they did here or anything notable? I think their overall deadline, considering they also traded Rozier, it's fine. I think it's.
Well, I think we'll get to them when we talk about PJ Washington next because we're talking about Dallas.
That's a good point. Let's go to Dallas. I'm very excited about the Thunder. The race for the 1 seed in the West also going to be fascinating. If I do it a handicap real quick, if you had to handicap the race for 1 in the West, it's like a virtual tie right now, I believe, between Denver, Oklahoma City, Minnesota. I'm going Denver 1, OKC 2, Minnesota 3. That's how I would power rank those teams.
I think OKC gets it because I think they
care more.
Yeah, care or just I don't know if they care, but the other teams
Clippers
maybe don't. I guess the Clippers and the Nuggets I don't think care as much, and then Minnesota I trust less. So I guess just sort of like that leaves the Thunder as the team there, but it's kind of funny. I mean, outside of Denver with the altitude, none of those teams maybe out. I guess Minnesota might take issue with that, but home court advantage, we don't think of any of those teams as like bona fide every year the playoff crowd is rocking because some of them are young. So yeah, it almost feels like more of a missed opportunity that like Sacramento won't get to have home court advantage or like, whatever happens with the play-in teams that they'll be missing that. Whereas like, is the B team Staples Center crowd really going to be making or breaking a series? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's more who gets who in the second round and some of that stuff is really what I'm looking at more so than, the pride of the number 1 seed.
I mean, Clippers-Lakers round 1 is not off the table.
No.
It should be fun. I'm into that from just like a weirdness standpoint of the Clippers being the home team, but that's going to be a Lakers partisan crowd. It just would be.
Yes.
I also think whoever's 5, whether it's the Suns, whether it's the Pelicans, whether it's the Kings, I think everyone in there at this point is probably just no. I love you, Minnesota. I'm glad you got a point guard who can dribble. Congratulations on getting Monte Morris. But that's the team everyone's I think going to be rooting for to fall to 4 in the 4-5. I think no question.
As a team, as a fan of a team that is actively in the 5 seed, I would love for Minnesota to fall to 4. Yes.
Yeah.
Can't confirm.
Yeah, can't confirm. Struck from the source. All right, Dallas Mavericks, you are up next. They make 2 trades for 2 players that I think fit really well, Brendan, within what they do, the way Luka Doncic in particular plays. The big one is PJ Washington and 2 second-round picks. Go from Charlotte. Charlotte gets Grant Williams, Seth Curry, and a top 2 protected 2027 first-round pick. And then they also get Daniel Gafford from the Washington Wizards, and it costs them Rashawn Holmes and draft compensation. Brendan, I think both moves I really, really like. The PJ Washington one I've seen more split opinion on so far in the reading I've done about the deadline. But considering the Grant thing, which I was high on, I'll take the L on this. I liked them getting Grant Williams. I liked what he can provide. I still don't totally want to write him off as a guy that can contribute. We've seen him play in good teams before, obviously, and be a positive player on those spots. But PJ Washington is just better than Grant Williams right now, and I think he's going to fit really nicely with them. His contracts are really good value as well. I think Dallas did some just really good business to reinforce this roster right now. And with Gafford, who's just who I saw someone tweet is the least embarrassing Wizard this year, and I think he's just a good player. And I think Washington is versatile, can do a lot for you, and I think he's going to thrive in this environment.
Yeah, I think the thing with Washington is he's maybe not as big as you would like at the 4 spot for Dallas, but that's never really been how they've built their team. Like Derrick Jones Jr. has been starting at the 4 for them a lot of the season. Even when they were in the conference finals, it was Dorian Finney-Smith. So this is sort of their MO. They want to be flexible. They want to be a little more swarming, especially since Jason Kidd has come in on the defensive end. And they want to have athleticism and length around Luka. So it fits how they've built it. It's just, to me, I would prefer a little more size. But the thing is with PJ, I loved him. I used to pay a lot more attention to the draft back when he was a prospect. And one of the things I loved about him is how physical and the way he could play bigger than he is. That made him more exciting to me. And I don't think he's really gotten to do much of that since going to Charlotte. And under Borrego, they were such an offense-first team. And then the past few years, their defense just generally has not had a lot of difference makers to kind of insulate him or make him any better. So hopefully this can, and that he can show some of that, and he'll have to, because if he's just an offensive guy for them, they don't really need that. I don't think he'll make a big, huge impact, but if he can be a two-way player, you're talking about somebody who we might start thinking of as like a centerpiece for this team if all goes according to plan. So I like it from that standpoint. Can we go through now, though, what it took to get him in sum? Because the Mavericks did a sign and trade to get Grant Williams.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Dallas's track record of moves is very funny because they often just throw more picks to fix the moves that didn't work before, which I kind of respect, but it is kind of funny that that's just kind of what they do, and they're trading like a top 2 2027 first round pick, top 2 protected 2027 first round pick is just one of the funnier pick protections I've seen as far as the trade goes. It's just like, we don't want to give you, we don't want to give you like a real pick, but we don't have a lot else. What if we just slap some fake protections on it, which for a pick we're hoping is like somewhere in the 20s.
They've been scouting the freshmen in high school, and they're convinced it's a 2-player draft or something. I don't know. So it's a little bit hard to fully do because even in this trade, right, they get 2 seconds, and they did the same thing with the Grant Williams deal. They gave up 3 seconds. They gave up 2 seconds, and they got 2 seconds in the Grant Williams trade. So let's just say that's nothing.
Did you by chance see the tank? Did you see the Tankathon? Or I think it was a Twitter post where they just like pointed out all the trades. It was second round picks, and it's like it felt like every damn pick in the second round. It was like I think next year is like converted to another team. Like it's not in order anymore. It's just like we just trade these. These are like these are fun money. Like it's kind of wild. Like what second round picks are. They're just.
It was fewer this year though. Last year was the year where everybody was going for like 4 and 5. This year it was a little less. But okay, so last summer they trade an unprotected 2030 pick swap to the Spurs to get Grant Williams. Let's just call it that was the trade. Because, again, seconds went both directions. Now they trade a top 2 protected straight-up pick in 2027 plus Seth Curry to get P.J. Washington. So, basically, they gave up 2 first-round picks for P.J. Washington when it was all said and done, plus a lot of other nonsense that's probably not doing them any favors in terms of their future flexibility. And Seth Curry, who I don't think is a playoff guy, but had played minutes for them, and they gave real money to. He's not a minimum player. So, they like to shoot themselves in the foot, and they are a very active team in the deadline. I think it's now 8 straight trade deadlines the Mavericks have made a deal, at least one deal.
Yep.
So,
feels right.
Very, very active. But, I like the move. Gafford, I love. I think as much as you can get excited about Derek Lively, I've seen Mavericks fans refer to him as a member of the Mavs Big Three. I think that's hilarious. He's a rookie center. He's 19 years old.
We need like Merriam-Webster to like weigh in and give us like an actual definition of big threes before people like. Did you meet the literal definition in the dictionary for a big three? Yeah. I think we need.
It's like how in the load management rules the league defined like you were an all-star within this realm of time, and it has to be that. You don't get to be a member of a big three unless you've like fulfilled the certification. But I don't think Gafford is some sort of star either, but it's at least better protection for Lively, where if you're telling me Dallas gets Denver in the first round, like he's chopped liver trying to guard Nikola Jokic. So this is at least just a playable big, and especially when you compare it to where they were last postseason, where they had basically zero of those. To have two plus Kleba if he's healthy is a really nice spot to be in, and I think they'll be a deeper team heading into this playoffs, which is huge and might be the difference between them advancing and not advancing. I mean, they didn't even make the playoffs last year, but you know what I mean.
A really interesting team also just from a standings perspective, because they are currently 8th. They're a game and a half back of the Kings. They're 2 full games back of the Suns and the Pelicans. They're they're a game and a half ahead of the Lakers, 2 ahead of the Jazz, and 3.5 ahead of the Warriors. They're kind of in their own little zone right now. But you would think, Brennan, with these moves and obviously just with the talent they have, they're the team, I think, in that 8 to in that play-in range and below. They're the one now I think you'd have to look at and think, okay, are they the team that's going to make a real push to push New Orleans out of the top 6? Like, yes, do they have some ground to make up? For sure. 2.5 games isn't nothing, and the Pelicans are playing pretty good basketball and didn't really make any real moves in their own right at the deadline. They're going to stay in the tax and just got rid of Keir Lewis. Other than that, they're keeping it intact. Dallas is, I think, in a position now just with the competency of the trades they made. They didn't do anything, go get another star. They just made competent basketball trades, and I think that has them poised to push for the top 6.
I think you would have to hope so. I think they're, on paper, a more talented team than the Pelicans, I guess. I kind of say that as I question it myself because I think New Orleans is very deep, but where Sacramento and New Orleans might have them beat with depth, I think, you would like to say, right? Luka, Kyrie, PJ Washington, Derek Lively, and, some 3-and-D wings. That should be enough to be better than those other groups. So, yeah, 6 should be their goal, and hope the chips fall in the right place to feel good about your first-round opponent. But it's just weird that we're here with a generational player on a team that's like fighting to make the playoffs every year.
And some of that is on Dallas, and I think some of it is on the West is just perpetually a juggernaut. The West is perpetually just hard. Like Luka.
Can we cover this real quick? I want to say this because people think that Brunson would not have been Brunson here.
No,
do you agree with me on this?
Yeah.
They play the same way.
Yeah, there is an inevitable point, Brendan, I think, in team building, where at the highest level, the teams that are the best, the Nuggets are really like the anomaly to this because Jokic is an anomaly in his own right. But you have overlap at times. You have overlapping skills, you have overlapping talent, you have overlapping strengths. Oftentimes, I think 99% of the time, that requires sacrifice from someone. In Dallas, in this specific case study, that is never happening with Luka Doncic. This is Luka. The day someone can make Luka adjust how he plays is the day that I think the earth turns on into their axis. For better or for worse. I think like he is who he is. Oftentimes it's very good. Jalen Brunson could never, ever be what he is with the Knicks without the opportunity to do it, and he was never going to get that opportunity in Dallas. And it's why, like, if you're going to go get a kind of different kind of point guard to play with him, Kyrie, for all of the very many things you could say about Kyrie, and how much he does like to play with the ball in his hand and dominate at times, that guy has a track record based on playing with LeBron, playing with Durant, of being able to pick his spots in every way. He doesn't need to dominate the ball in the same way and can play off of Luka in a way that I don't think Brunson is totally equipped to. That's just the nature of their skill sets a little bit. But yeah, Brunson absolutely was never going to be this guy with Luka. There wasn't like a two-headed monster with those two guys sitting there in plain view that Dallas messed up. Brunson needed to go to New York if he was ever going to be this.
Yeah, in the second round in 2022, when they upset the Suns, he was Brunson, 19, 4, and 3 on 45% shooting from the field. And
fine.
In Golden State, in that series, the third round, he was 18, 4, and 4 on 46% shooting. Very serviceable player, but not a guy you ever, I mean, that's why he's paid what he's paid. So, yeah, I think they're still just trying to figure out what the right pieces are. It's not for a lack of trying. I mean, Porzingis, Brunson, Kyrie, they've tried, but yeah, I mean, they still are out on the outside looking in of a surefire playoff spot right now.
Let's move on to our next team. That is going to be the Philadelphia 76ers. Before we do that, I want to tell you about our friends at Homage. Homage is an ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses that uses vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and popular culture. Use the link below to make your purchase and support the Just Basketball Show. Brendan, I'm eagerly awaiting them restocking their starter MLB jacket collection. I have set up an email alert, so when the Cleveland Guardians jacket is back in stock, immediate cop. You support like 4 baseball teams, so do you have one that you would want to get?
I support the 2 nearest baseball teams to where I reside, and I will check out the D-backs and Padres jackets. I was a positive jinx for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Thank you very much. I'd said goodbye, and they made the World Series, so they would love for me to continue to hate them.
Brennan, I just want to. You needled me about the not remembering which Thompson twin I wanted to talk about in that sense. I'm going to needle you about.
Oh, I'm more than happy to be needled, but
okay.
It's
gotta
2.
tell you the Padres one. It's pretty great. Just looking at it right now.
I'll check it out.
Great. It's pretty good. I don't see a D-backs one, which feels like a problem for me personally. That's kind of a bummer. But check out Homage. Use our link below. Buy yourself something nice. They have a bunch of WWE stuff as well. All kinds of stuff there at Homage. All right, Philadelphia. Philly made one of the other surprise moves of the day, Brendan, in getting Buddy Hield from the Indiana Pacers. Marcus Morris. Furkan. Congratulations to Furkan Korkmaz for finally getting his trade request approved, and he finally gets out of Philly like 7 years after he first made that trade. So just slow clap for Furkan getting out of Philadelphia finally. There's also a 2024 second-round pick from Toronto, a 2029 second-round pick from Portland, and a 2029 second-round pick and some cash going out. They also trade Daniel House, who I believe who has been waived or will be waived, to the Pistons.
Yeah.
And another second-round pick goes to grease the wheels of that deal. They trade Jaden Springer to the 76ers for a second-round pick, and they also trade Pat Bev to the Milwaukee Bucks in a move that makes me think they think they're getting Kyle Lowry in the buyout market. A busy day, Brendan, for Philly. Buddy Hield, the headliner. What do you make of what Philly has done here, particularly considering obviously Joel Embiid is currently injured?
Yeah, the Beverly thing is interesting, especially to also get rid of Springer. They're a little light at that spot. Maybe it is Lowry. But this, I mean, not to start with the nerdiest possible part of this, but maybe. This is what Daryl Morey's great at. He's able to add and get under the tax at the deadline. It's like his favorite shit to do. He loves to get better and also save his owner money and, show off and flex in front of all the other GMs who wish that they could be as good as he is or whatever. But Buddy Hield, I like it. It is a version of what I think they needed, but I guess I wonder, was that for fully him to be a part of what the team looks like now, or is that sort of a, hey, why not? We'll see if we re-sign him. It's just a little puzzling because he, of course, as they want to have cap space in the summer, is also an expiring contract. Mm-hmm. And I'm not convinced you want to have like a starting backcourt of him and Maxey, right? No. But I wouldn't hate it if he's like a guy who's your 8th man on a better version of this team a year from now. It just felt like a flyer more than anything, which I don't mind. But they gave up 3 seconds, it's not insignificant. What do you think of it? I'm not just fully positive what their plans with him are, so it's hard for me to evaluate like what was good or bad about it.
So that I agree with. I don't feel like we fully understand what Daryl Morey is cooking here. I think that's absolutely fair and reasonable. I think that is a mystery. I that this felt to me, Brendan, more like a obviously like win now move, and I think kind of what they've done of late and the Embiid stuff. Even to me, it felt like they're just planning on him being back in a month or 6 weeks or something, and just picking up where they left off and going for it. And I understand that you don't know, you can never take a season for granted. It's hard to take a season off. Embiid's injury history, I think, does suggest that you just never know how many you're going to have with him in his prime, and that's a real thing. The shooting that Hield is going to give you is, I think, great for the spacing around Embiid. He's going to get a ton of open shots. But what they are building, what they are doing in this case, to me, it's unclear. And like, I probably would have rather also just like kept Pat Bev than Kyle Lowry. I get there's a homecoming aspect to Lowry. He's a more proven winner in a certain sense than Patrick Beverley is, but is he better than Pat Bev right now? Like,
No,
probably not. Like, I don't exactly know what's going on here.
but I don't think he's great either, personally. So it's like,
No,
to me, that's kind of a C minus for a C minus or whatever.
Okay, that's fair enough. I guess the idea is, if I'm trying to explain this in a positive way, you're probably looking at the next stretch of games, and while Embiid is out, and saying we just need to give Maxey an easy button to pass to. This provides us that. And we don't want to be in a position where we slide out of the top 6 while Joel is out. They are currently 5th. They're 2.5 games back of the 4-seeded Knicks and Bucks, who are also 6 games. They're also 2.5 games back of the Bucks, who are in 3rd right now. Indiana, who they obviously traded with, is 2 games behind them. The Heat are 3 games behind them and maybe showing some signs of life based on how they played the other night. Orlando's a little bit behind them. I think this, to me, Brendan, feels like a hedge of let's just get Joel back, let's get healthy, and we'll take our chances from there, and at least made some kind of additive move, even if it isn't getting Bruce Brown or something of that kind. It's a very specific kind of addition. It just feels like let's not fall out of the top 6 and be ready when Joel comes back.
Sure. They're also 30th in 3-point frequency and 20th in 3-point accuracy, so they did need shooting. I mean, Kelly Oubre has started
a wild thing for a Daryl Morey team for that to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the Philly teams have been that way, but it is a little funny to think. I guess too, like they're starting Oubre, 32.7% 3-point shooter this season. Melton has always been a low volume guy. He can make wide open ones off the catch, but beyond that, probably overextended. Batum, kind of a similar guy. So, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense from that standpoint. I guess I just wouldn't have looked at their roster and thought they were a Hield away, but this clearly is not an all-in move. This is something for this season, and we'll see the master plan of what they're concocting come June, July, I guess.
Well, in Indiana, as the B side of this, I think quickly before we get to our last team, this to me was a weird trade to see in the morning, Brendan, because it just felt like, why are you taking something of a step back and not getting a ton of value, I think, back in return here when you trade it for Pascal Siakam, and then they get Doug McDermott. So I guess they just kind of like shuffled some chairs around and got a shooter.
You know why they did this? You know why they got rid of Buddy Hield? Because he's like the worst defender in the entire NBA.
Yeah.
And the Indiana Pacers, I love that they looked themselves in the mirror and said, this is not going to work. This is not a real basketball team. And they got Pascal. They are starting Nesmith. We'll see if Nembhard can turn into a serviceable defender in time. They have Ben Shepherd and Jarris Walker they've been giving more time to. We'll see, I think, too, what this means for Mathurin. This is a huge opportunity down the stretch and into the postseason for him. And they've turned Jalen Smith into a pretty solid backup big. So you look at their rotation now, and it is full of two-way players in a way that it just wasn't before. And I think that's why they still traded Hield after all that time where we thought preseason they were going to do it, and then he was a big part of their early success, so maybe not. And to get 3 seconds for him, that's more than they gave up to get Obi Toppin. So they replenished that, and I think that they continue to be really nimble with the way that they've built their roster. And I like that they weren't just like, great, we made the NBA Cup final. Things are going according to plan. Let's go. Or, okay, Pascal's our one move. We're where we want to be. It's like, no, form the identity you want to form and do what it takes to get there. And I don't think Buddy Hield can be a starting two on a championship team, especially if Tyrese is the starting one, similar to what we said about Maxey. So, and they do share their first name. So, yeah, I think I really like it from their standpoint, even though it's probably going to get forgotten in a year. It's a smart move.
Whoever gets the 3 seed, I think, is praying to God that Indiana, or whatever deity they believe in, is the 6 seed and not Miami. I think that's also just like going to be something fun to watch, because even if Miami has not had the greatest season, I think everyone would be like, yeah, I'd rather play the Pacers in round 1 than Miami.
Absolutely. Yeah. Get them on their first go round rather than the defending Eastern Conference representative in the finals.
Yeah. Then playoff Jimmy. All right, last team, the Toronto Raptors, who, Brendan, have had a very active, busy whole trade season. They obviously are part of the OG trade, bringing in Amanda Quickly and RJ Barrett. Then they get Spencer Dinwiddie from the Nets in exchange for Dennis Schroeder and Thad Young. Dinwiddie, there's seemingly like something went wrong in Brooklyn, and I want to know what that was. Lord knows, but he will be waived by Toronto. And then they also get Kelly Olynyk and Ochai Agbaji in exchange for a first-round pick. As part of that deal, Kira Lewis and Otto Porter Jr. go to Utah. So a deal that nets Toronto, Kelly Olynyk, who we thought could be an added piece for a contender, not a team outside of the play-in in the Eastern Conference, as well as Ochai Agbaji, who's now on his 3rd team in a very young NBA career. But I like that. Brendan, it feels kind of sacrilegious, or like not sacrilegious, but weird to say Ochai Agbaji is the guy that I most want to talk about. But I just like him. I like him as a wing. I think he's going to fit well with what they have. So I don't know if he was worth a first here and what this is really doing. But I just think he's a good player. And there's some reporting as well that Masai has like known him and his family for a long time. So there's like some one of those classic like, hey, I know you, like I trust you kind of things, like a favorite of Masai's, I guess. But
yeah,
an interesting set of moves for them in the way they've kind of reshaped the roster over the last couple months.
Yeah, I haven't seen what the first-round pick that they gave up is, so I guess that would affect it, but I think the two that they're going to have are the Pacers and then the less favorable of the Thunder and the Clippers. So they don't have their own. Obviously, the Spurs have theirs. So I guess it's a wash as to which one they gave up. It feels like a lot for Olynyk and Agbaji, but if they keep Olynyk and Agbaji does hit, maybe we won't feel that way a year or two from now. I think Olynyk makes a lot of sense as a big for a team that wants to have downhill forward scorers like RJ and Scotty Barnes and even Emmanuel Quickly as their kind of primary guys, at least for right now, as somebody who can space and move the ball. I think Olynyk has played well with other bigs in Utah, most of those being spacers and offensive threats themselves. We'll see how he fits with Pirtle. I don't know how much he's really played with Walker Kessler. That's fine. But I agree with you on Agbaji. I feel like his defense has a ways to go, but to me, he feels like a higher upside version of like a Malik Beasley. Maybe not, comparing anybody as a shooter to Beasley is tough because he's such a good shooter.
But he won't be memed into oblivion because of his like just utter inability to like get in a proper defensive stance and not be caught flat-footed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and look, Agbaji has shot 36 and 33% in the NBA. So, but if you go back to college, it was higher than that. And I think his release is quick. He can kind of move off the ball in a good way and be a shooter in those situations. And I think, I kind of believe that anybody can become a serviceable defender at 6'5" with solid wingspan, and he's only 23 years old. So I think he can be a rotation guy and another one that, next to well, maybe it's too high of a comp, but like I remember Adam Mares like blew our minds with that Quentin Grimes comparison of KCP. It's like if you could turn Abaji into like 75% of KCP, that wouldn't blow my mind. I think that's a reasonable outcome for him. And if you said he was that, again, perfect next to Barnes. So I like this move for the Raptors, and they had an extra first round pick to blow. And so there you go. Just very out of left field that this one happened, but I don't hate it at all.
Pointed out too, I saw on Twitter, first time I've used Twitter in a long time for more than like 2 minutes, and I felt insane. Right now, they only have 7 players under contract for next season. RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes obviously being the most important. Jakob Pertl, Grady Dick, Chris Boucher, Jalen McDaniels, and Ochai Agbaji. Then Bruce Brown has a team option. You would think they'll pick that up. And then they could re-sign quickly and re-sign Olynyk. That's 10, but they'll have some cap space. This feels like creating some flexibility. Part of the deal, I think, with Schroeder was he was due $13 million next season, and they just didn't want to pay him $13 million next season. So they found a way to not do that, and that's probably a part
that
of
trade makes a lot of sense for both teams to flip to that one. Toronto getting Dinwiddie, again, if the ball's going to be in Scotty's hands and RJ's hands, more a shooting guard more so than a dribbling guard, I think makes a lot of sense. And flipping from Schroeder to Dinwiddie, and Schroeder hadn't even been starting anyway, makes sense to me. And I think the same thing for Brooklyn with the way their team's built. They actually really do need somebody to just create dribble penetration, drive and kick, walk the ball down the court, run a pick and roll, basic point guardy stuff that I think Schroeder is going to be better at. So that one also surprising, but felt like a huge win-win. I just didn't have Dinwiddie on the going to be traded list until like the past 24 hours. And then, like you said, there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on around him. There's like a guy in Brooklyn who said he might get bought out if he wasn't traded, and he tweeted back at him like, yes, who? No, I won't. Who are you talking to? Then he does get bought out by the Raptors. Like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I guess, did he get bought out?
I think I've seen that he will. I hadn't had a chance to fully catch up on like every buyout.
Well,
and frankly, Brendan, I'm going to be honest with you. He's a fine player. I don't think Spencer Dinwiddie's buyout is like a massive thing we need to like worry about in like the title race or anything.
No, it's not. I was going to complete that by saying I hope they don't, because I do think he could make some sense for them. But either way, I do like Schroeder in Brooklyn, and you're right about the cap stuff. The Raptors are an incomplete project here. I didn't love that they kept Bruce Brown personally.
Yeah, I would have traded him too.
If they didn't have an offer, then I get it.
Anything that didn't happen, we'll end on this, Brendan. Anything that didn't happen that you're disappointed by, I will just say I just kind of would have liked to see the Lakers trade for DeJounte Murray just for the sake of seeing what that would have looked like. I understand why it doesn't happen. The Lakers immediately in posturing mode of like, we're going to have 3 firsts to trade this summer. Who could we trade for? That's going to be really annoying really fast. But anything that didn't happen or any other moves we didn't hit on that you feel like deserve a little bit of a spotlight here at the end of the show?
No, I think I'm still wrapping my head around everything that did happen, so I don't have that. I would just, I think the fact that the Bucks weren't able to do anything really outside of the Beverly thing, which, as I said, not a huge believer that he's going to make a difference. That just sucks from a competitiveness standpoint. I would have liked Milwaukee to be able to improve there, and I guess I would agree, and plenty of other shows are going to talk plenty about this, so we don't need to give our 2 cents, but the Lakers and Warriors standing pat, if you had said that a month ago, I think people would have thought you were a lunatic, and they both basically did nothing. So we might be Golden State and LA lists in the playoffs this year.
Also did I will say also did quite like Royce O'Neal to Phoenix, and I think the Phoenix Suns are probably a case study of why we should stop getting excited about minimum signings.
I did not, so don't worry.
I did. I'm a big Yuta Watanabe guy, and I just like his game, and didn't work out, I guess.
I was a believer in Keita Bates-Diop, but other than that, I'm not a Chimezie Metu guy. I did not believe in Yuta. Hey, they've gotten Bol. He's playing real minutes on a winning team, so maybe they'll all make us look stupid all over again if that works out. We'll see. I guess believe it when we see it for more than a month or so, but he's been good.
All right, that has been our reaction to the 2024 NBA trade deadline. The 5 teams that defined it: the New York Knicks, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Dallas Mavericks, the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Toronto Raptors. Now we'll see how the league reacts. We'll see how what the ripple effects are here. We'll see what the buyout market looks like, I'm sure, in the coming days when those guys start getting bought out. But I've been Chris Manning. That has been Brendon Kleen. You can check us out twice a week here on the Just Basketball Show. We'll talk to you guys next week. Get back to some action. Check in on our waving the flag teams perhaps and see what some of the buyouts are. See what news we get between now and then. The NBA never rests. The NBA trade deadline is come and gone. Enjoy the hoops. We'll talk to you soon.